Hi, everybody. Jimmy DeYoung. Welcome to Prophecy Today video. On the telecast today, we're going to be talking about some of the items that have taken place this last week with our broadcast partners, getting their input, and I'll make a short comment prophetically as to how all of this comes together. It's so important that you understand the times in which we're living. That's why we cover current events, and then we come back and give you the prophetic scenario. You put the two together, you can then come to a conclusion. Hey, we must be close to the time of the rapture of the church, the next main event on God's calendar of activities. Colonel Bob Maginnis is our man who covers the world geopolitically. He's in the Washington, D.C. area. We were talking about the Obama nuclear summit that took place this last week, and I asked Bob, what about the potential material that could get into the hands of terrorists out there?
We have probably in the neighborhood of 1,600 tons of highly enriched uranium and another 500 tons of plutonium, and basically just sitting around. That could be used to make about 100,000 nuclear weapons. So it's to our advantage to try to control that, and if at all possible, to destroy it, make it unusable by those that would seek to acquire it. We know Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups have publicized their desire to get control of this material or some of it and then use it against us and others. So that's what the president had in mind. It's a very tough uphill battle, but certainly something that we should want to do.
I also wanted to ask Bob about President Obama and his imposition of a peace on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as to the advice that he might be receiving from General Petraeus.
Petraeus has said this a couple of weeks ago, and I understand when you're out there in Central Command talking with leaders of the Arab world, certainly dealing with the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and there's complaints that the Israeli-Palestinian issue is not resolved, and that is contributing to the problems. No, it's just a weak excuse. Totalitarian governments do that all the time. And I find it a bit disingenuous by some of these leaders to suggest that you have to resolve what I consider a rather intractable situation before you can really come to grips with issues in Iraq. Issues in Iraq are radically different, the same thing in Afghanistan, and of course our situation with Iran. The Ahmadinejad is just using Israel as an excuse. It is not the basis for the problems we have with that nation. So I hear this from the president. I tend not to embrace it.
Colonel Bob Maginnis, our man in Washington, D.C., looking at the geopolitical activities of this world. Yisrael Medad, Winky, as we affectionately refer to him as, is located in the middle part of the state of Israel, a place called Shiloh, a great biblical historic location. But I was talking with Winky about the Obama administration considering the option, as I just mentioned with Bob, about imposing this peace process on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Well, we do know that obviously someone in the staff has dropped off to the Washington Post and the New York Times, which I've read, almost mirror image stories about policy meetings and Obama dropping in and listening to people talk. One of them, one of the most anti-Israel strategy people in the administration or next to the administration, Zbigniew Brzezinski. And the story is out that he might introduce his own plan. He can introduce as many plans as he wants to. In fact, Ehud Barak introduced the plan. Bill Clinton introduced the plan. It's all broken on the fact that the Palestinian side of the negotiations are not willing to accept anything that would be anywhere accommodating to everybody in place. And so they just sit still, and hopefully, as it's been already proven in the past year with Obama, that they'll continue to come down harder on Israel rather than the people who are not willing to express any sort of compromise. Mr. Netanyahu, the most right-wing of Israeli politicians in recent memory, has accepted the idea of a state for the Arabs in this area, has frozen the construction beyond the Green Line, and other issues which have been called unprecedented by a lady by the name of Hillary Clinton, who's now coming back and trying to continue an arm wrestle with the Israeli government, which is not very healthy for all.
Yisrael Medad from Shiloh in the center of the State of Israel. Dr. Rob Congdon covers the European Union for us. When I was talking with Rob, we were talking about the increase in anti-Semitic attacks in Europe, and I asked him, what about this report?
Well, it's still primarily in Western Europe. Poland remembers well, and Germany remembers well, so we don't see it as much. But overall, there's a movement toward the extreme conservative right wings through many of the countries, and in doing that, you're bringing in the anti-Semitic groups, and they're voicing it. And then, too, there's been the sense that, okay, now is the time you can criticize Israel, because with the U.S. somewhat pulling back on Israel, that opens up more freedoms in Europe for those types of groups to speak out, and I think you're seeing the effect of that now.
Dr. Rob Congdon covering the European Union for us. The conversation that I had with Rabbi Yoel Keren is so exciting. You're not going to be able to hear all of it here on Prophecy Today video. You can go to our website, prophecytoday.com, go to PTRN, and you can find there the complete interview that I had with Yoel Keren. I discussed with him an article written by a man, Dr. Max Singer, who is a research analyst, and he claims in his article that if the Arab Muslim world would recognize the Jewish right to the Temple Mount of the city of Jerusalem, there could be peace. I asked Rabbi Yoel Keren, will the Muslim world ever recognize the right of the Jewish people to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem?
Well, the honest truth is no. I don't believe they'll ever stand for it. Well, one day they will, but I don't think it'll be. I don't think it'll be anytime soon. I don't think it'll be willingly. You know, it's not really a matter of my opinion or this person's opinion that was quoted in the article. This is coming straight from the mouth of the Almighty Himself. In Isaiah chapter 2, we're told, in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as chief among the mountains, will be raised above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. And they'll beat their spears and their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they learn war anymore. So we know that the Jews coming back to the Temple Mount and the word of the Lord going forth from Jerusalem and the temple being built will eventually bring peace. The question is, how do we get there?
And indeed, Rabbi, that is the question. How are we going to get there? Very interesting conversation with Rabbi Yoel Keren. You know, the rabbi said the Messiah will make it all happen. Let's take a moment and think about that prophetic scenario that will unfold. Bible prophecy indicates after these nations align themselves, form a coalition to try to destroy the Jewish state, Ezekiel chapter 39, verses 1 to 6 says that this Islamic world will be basically destroyed, rendered inoperative. 5 out of every 6, chapter 39, verse 2 says, of the attacking enemies and all of their peoples in their nations will be destroyed. So the Islamic world will be rendered inoperative. Daniel chapter 11, verse 44, we brought to the attention of those who have studied it with us in the past that the Antichrist usurps the victory for this defeat of the Islamic world. And in verse 45, he tells the Jewish people to put their temple up on the Temple Mount. Remember, it is the Antichrist who has promised peace to the Middle East. He confirms a peace, Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, between Israel and its neighbors. And then when this attack takes place, God out of heaven gives the victory to the Jewish nation. He keeps them from being completely annihilated, and the Antichrist usurps that victory. And so the Temple Mount does indeed have a very unique place in peace in the Middle East. Howbeit this first peace that we're talking about, the next peace in the beginning of the tribulation period, is going to be somewhat of a pseudo-peace. Zechariah chapter 1 verse 16 says Jesus Christ will return to Jerusalem to build his temple there. Chapter 6 verse 12 says he will build the temple. Verse 13 says he will rule and reign from that particular location. Remember, Rabbi Keren said, and he quoted for us Isaiah chapter 2, in those days when there's a temple on the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem, the word shall go forth from out of the city of Jerusalem. And those who are using weapons to try to kill the Jewish people and others, when Jesus Christ comes back and rules and reigns from that temple, they will take those military weapons and turn them into farming implements, and they will study war no more. So the Temple Mount does play a key role in the pseudo-peace, which is short-lived, and at the beginning of the tribulation period, an eternal peace when Jesus Christ comes to rule and reign on the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem. But I continually remind you, as we talk about prophecy yet to be fulfilled, the next event on God's calendar of activities is the rapture of the church. Jesus shouts, archangel shouts, trumpet God sounds, and those of us who know Christ as Lord and Savior are caught up to be with him in the air. Everything we've talked about on this broadcast indicates that rapture could happen at any moment. And having said that, nothing left for me to say except let's keep looking up until